It happens in absolute silence. You walk away from a conversation convinced you made a stellar impression, but across town, the person you just spoke with is sighing in relief that it is finally over. They will not confront you. They will not explain what went wrong. They will simply stop calling. There is one particular habit, the fourth one we will look at, that feels like active empathy to you, but functions like a slow poison to your relationships. And by the end of this video, you will understand exactly how to spot it before the damage becomes permanent. This is the cruelest kind of social rejection because it leaves no footprints. You are left alone with your thoughts, replaying interactions, searching for the exact moment the warmth faded from their eyes. The truth is painful. You are probably not doing anything intentionally rude or mean. Instead, you are likely repeating subtle, invisible errors in human connection, habits so small they are transparent to you, yet exhausting to everyone else. Because no one points them out, you keep repeating them, wondering why your relationships remain frozen in surface-level polite distance. Epictetus, the ancient Stoic slave turned philosopher, observed that we have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a very specific reason, so that we can listen twice as much as we speak. Yet, modern life has turned conversation into a competitive sport. We have developed destructive patterns that quietly alienate the people we care about most. Today, we will unpack the hidden conversational habits that drive people away and how the ancient wisdom of Stoicism can help us dismantle these invisible barriers to build deep, authentic connections. Let us begin with the first hidden fracture, waiting for your turn to speak instead of actually listening. Imagine sitting across from someone you value. They are opening up about a difficult week, their voice carrying the weight of genuine exhaustion. You are looking at them, nodding at the correct intervals, making steady eye contact. But inside your mind, a completely different scene is playing out. Your brain is a racing engine, designing your response, sorting through your own memories for a similar story, waiting impatiently for them to take a breath so you can launch your prepared monologue. This is not listening. This is merely a state of active waiting. People can feel this shift in energy, even if they cannot explain it. They sense that you are not fully present with them, that their vulnerability is merely serving as a cue for your next performance. The connection immediately becomes transactional. Eventually, they simply stop sharing anything of substance with you. After all, why offer your genuine thoughts to someone who is only using them as a stepping stone for their own voice? Consider how this plays out in daily life. A colleague might share the heavy burden of caring for an aging parent. Her friend nods, offering sympathetic murmurs, but the very second a pause occurs, the friend redirects the conversation entirely to her own family struggles. It is not done out of malice, but the pattern repeats. Every vulnerable moment is intercepted and redirected. Within months, the confidences dry up. The friendship plateaus into empty small talk, not because they had a falling out, but because one of them realized she was ultimately talking to herself. Epictetus understood that true listening is a rare, almost sacred gift. The Stoics practiced deep presence, training themselves to be fully anchored in the current moment with the person right in front of them. When you spend a conversation planning your next sentence, you are living in a non-existent future. You are sacrificing the living human being before you to satisfy your own ego. True listening says, your experience matters more than my need to be heard. To break this habit, try practicing the 2-second rule. When someone finishes speaking, do not respond immediately. Allow a deliberate, 2-second silence to exist between their final word and your first. This simple pause guarantees that you actually absorbed what they said and signals to them that their words were heavy enough to carry weight. This brings us to the second habit, which turns casual conversations into quiet battlefields, the urge to one-up every single story. When someone shares a personal milestone, perhaps a frustrating delay at the airport, a difficult project at work, or a moment of pride in their child's achievement, how do you react? If your immediate instinct is to share an experience that is bigger, more dramatic, or more extreme, you are operating under a dangerous illusion. You might think you are bonding over shared experiences, but the other person feels as though their reality has just been erased. If they mention a difficult client, you describe an impossible one. If they mention a 6-hour flight delay, yours was 12. This habit transforms mutual sharing into an uninvited competition. By constantly topping their stories, you send a highly damaging, silent message. Your experience is not significant enough to dwell on. Now let me show you what real life looks like. Think of a young woman proudly sharing her acceptance into her dream university at a family dinner. Before the congratulations can even settle, an older relative interrupts to detail how much more competitive college admissions were in his day, listing the multiple schools that fought for him. The young woman's face falls, her excitement instantly deflated. Her milestone was hijacked to serve as a runway for someone else's nostalgia. She learns a silent lesson. Do not share good news with this person, because they will always find a way to make it about themselves. Marcus Aurelius wrote extensively about the necessity of conquering the ego's desire for superiority. The sudden impulse to one-up others is almost always a mask for deep-seated insecurity, a fragile need to prove that our lives are more vibrant, more tragic, or more successful than those around us. Marcus reminded himself that other people's victories do not diminish our own value, and that true strength lies in our ability to let others stand in the light without trying to pull them into our shadow. Have you ever caught yourself doing this? Not because you wanted to hurt them, but because you desperately wanted them to see you, to validate your life? It takes immense self-confidence to let someone else's moment belong entirely to them. The next time someone shares an achievement or a struggle, resist the urge to match it. Instead, ask a follow-up question. Validate their experience first, and let their story breathe. But what happens when someone shares a problem, and you do not try to compete, but instead try to fix it? This leads us to the third habit, offering unsolicited advice. This is the trap that catches the most well-meaning people. Someone you care about describes a challenge they are facing at work or in a relationship. Before they have even finished painting the picture, your mind has already constructed a 3-step solution. You immediately jump in with what they should do, who they should call, and how they should feel. You believe you are being incredibly helpful and supportive. In reality, they feel dismissed. Most people do not share their struggles because they are looking for logical solutions. They share because they are looking for resonance, understanding, and validation. When you rush straight to the solution, you completely bypass the emotional landscape they actually wanted you to walk through with them. You treat their vulnerable emotional state as an inconvenience, an obstacle to be cleared away as quickly as possible. Consider the relationship between a parent and a teenager. The teenager begins to share the painful social dynamics of her school day. The parent, wanting to protect her, immediately dictates a list of actions. Talk to the counselor, ignore those classmates, change lunch tables. The teenager shuts down. She wanted her parent to feel her confusion and pain, to tell her that it is okay to feel hurt. Instead, she was handed a to-do list. Over time, she stops sharing her internal world entirely, leaving the parent wondering why their relationship has become so distant. Epictetus urged us to understand what each specific moment requires of us before we act. Not every problem is a math equation waiting to be solved. Often, the most powerful tool we possess is not our intellect, but our presence. The urge to fix things immediately is often a coping mechanism for our own discomfort. We do not want to sit with the heavy, unresolved emotions of others, so we try to sweep them away with practical advice. Before you offer your wisdom, ask one simple, transformative question. Do you want me to help you brainstorm solutions, or do you just need me to listen? This simple boundary preserves their dignity and ensures you are meeting their actual needs, rather than your own desire to feel useful. If you have made it this far, you are already demonstrating a level of self-awareness that most people never cultivate. Everything before this was preparation. This is where it actually changes. The fourth habit is the one that destroys deep connections the fastest, the habit of bringing every single topic back to yourself. This is the conversational hijack. Someone mentions they are considering a career change, and within seconds, you are holding court on your own career path, your personal philosophies on labor, and your past job interviews. They bring up a novel they enjoyed, and suddenly the conversation is dominated by your reading list, your critique of the author, and your personal intellectual tastes. To you, this feels like sharing. To them, it feels like they are merely providing the writing prompts for your solo performance. When every subject introduced is systematically rerouted back to your life, others quickly realize that their role in the relationship is that of an audience member, not a partner. They stop introducing new topics. Why bother starting a thread when they already know it will end up woven into your tapestry? The connection becomes incredibly draining, leaving them feeling completely invisible. This is precisely what Marcus Aurelius warned against when he wrote about the vital importance of showing genuine, unselfish interest in the inner lives of others. He knew that the ego is like gravity, constantly trying to pull everything into its own orbit. True wisdom requires us to actively resist this pull. When we allow a conversation to remain centered on a topic someone else introduced, we are showing them the ultimate form of respect. We are telling them that their world is interesting to us, completely independent of how it relates to our own. When a friend brings up a topic, try to stay on their path for as long as possible. Ask them why they feel that way, how they reached that conclusion, or what they plan to do next. Keep the spotlight focused exactly where they placed it, rather than turning it back on yourself. Now, let us examine a habit that cuts connections off before they can even form, interrupting and finishing other people's sentences. We live in a fast-paced world, and it is easy to find yourself completing the thoughts of someone who speaks slowly or hesitates as they search for the right word. You might think you are showing how aligned you are with their thinking, demonstrating how quickly your minds connect. But to the person speaking, it feels like a quiet act of dominance. It signals that your time is too valuable to wait for their delivery, that you already know what they are going to say, and that your completion of the thought is superior to their own struggle to express it. This habit is highly destructive because it robs people of their conversational agency. Some people require time to process complex thoughts or select the precise words to describe their feelings. When you constantly jump in to finish their thoughts, you derail their momentum. Eventually, they learn to keep their contributions incredibly brief and simple, avoiding any depth because they know they will never be allowed to reach the destination on their own. Seneca, the great Stoic statesman, wrote deeply about patience as a fundamental pillar of wisdom. He believed that impatience is a direct reflection of internal chaos, a sign that we are slaves to our own momentum. To interrupt someone is to prioritize your own comfort over their right to exist and express themselves fully. Seneca practiced deliberate silence, teaching himself to let another person's words land completely, allowing the silence to settle before offering a response. He understood that true communication requires us to respect the rhythm of the other person. If you notice yourself beginning to interrupt, physically close your mouth. Take a breath. Let the silence hang in the air, even if it feels uncomfortable. That quiet space is where genuine trust begins to grow. But even if you do not interrupt, you might still be keeping the conversation shallow by falling into the sixth habit, only asking surface-level questions. We are all familiar with the standard scripts. How are you? Fine. How is work? Busy. How was your weekend? Good. These are not conversations. They are social maintenance rituals. While they are perfectly acceptable for brief encounters with acquaintances, relying on them in closer relationships signals a profound lack of curiosity. Surface questions demand surface answers, and surface answers keep people at a safe, emotionally sterile distance. When you never venture past basic updates, you communicate that you do not actually want to know the person behind the facts. People quickly sense this boundary. They realize that you are simply checking a box, performing the social duty of asking without any real desire to hear the truth. Consequently, they keep their guard up, and the relationship flatlines into pleasant, empty routines. Marcus Aurelius believed that human beings are made for cooperation and deep connection, but that this requires us to venture beneath the surface of things. It requires us to ask questions that invite vulnerability. Instead of asking what someone did over the weekend, ask what the highlight of their week was. Instead of asking how their job is going, ask what has been challenging them lately. By replacing transactional questions with experiential ones, you open a doorway into their inner world, showing them that you are a safe harbor for real, substantive conversation. This brings us to a habit that actively turns people away, making everything a debate. There is a distinct difference between an intellectual discussion and a constant state of combat. If you find yourself immediately searching for the logical flaw in every statement someone makes, correcting minor factual errors in their stories, or explaining why their personal preferences in art, music, or food are incorrect, you are not engaging in stimulating debate. You are exhausting everyone around you. When people know that every thought they voice will be met with a counterargument or a correction, they simply stop talking. They do not want to defend their opinions. They simply wanted to share them. By turning every casual conversation into a courtroom, you force people to keep their thoughts locked away, protecting themselves from your need to be correct. Think of the family member who cannot let a single casual remark pass without challenging it. If someone mentions an interest in a new hobby, they point out its impracticality. If someone expresses excitement about a movie, they dissect its flaws. This relentless critical lens does not display intelligence. It displays a deep-seated need to control the narrative. Over time, invitations to family events dwindle, and conversations with them become entirely scripted and shallow because no one wants to offer up a real thought just to have it dissected. Epictetus modeled profound restraint in this regard. He taught that our primary goal should be the preservation of our character and our relationships, not the defense of our intellectual pride. Not every incorrect statement requires your correction. Not every differing opinion is a call to arms. Often, showing respect for another person's right to see the world differently is infinitely more valuable than proving that your view is the correct one. Finally, we arrive at the eighth habit, the one that destroys trust faster than any other, leaving a trail of broken relationships that can almost never be repaired, sharing private information with others. Trust is the invisible currency of all deep relationships. When someone confides in you about a struggle they are facing, a secret fear, or a sensitive family matter, they are handing you something fragile. They are trusting that you will protect it. But when you take that information and share it with someone else, even if you do so under the guise of concern, or even if you leave out their name, you have committed a profound breach of trust. This habit does not just damage your relationships. It systematically destroys them. When someone discovers you have shared something they told you in confidence, they do not just feel a passing sense of disappointment. They feel exposed, vulnerable, and fundamentally unsafe in your presence. Suddenly, every private moment, every shared laugh, and every vulnerable confession they have ever offered you becomes retrospective poison. To understand how easily we fall into this trap, picture a quiet office on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. Two colleagues, Sarah and Clara, are sitting together in a break room. Sarah, visibly exhausted, finally opens up. She confesses that she is struggling deeply with anxiety, that the pressure of her new role is keeping her awake at night, and that she is terrified of being judged as incompetent. It is a moment of raw, human vulnerability. Clara listens, nods, and offers comforting words. But the next day, while having lunch with another colleague, Clara mentions Sarah's struggle. She frames it entirely as concern. She says she is just worried about Sarah and wants to make sure everyone is looking out for her. Within a week, the whisper network of the office does its work. Half the department knows. Sarah finds out when a casual acquaintance asks her, with pity in their eyes, if she is holding up okay. Sarah is utterly humiliated. Something she shared in a private moment of exhaustion has been distributed like currency. When she confronted her, Clara apologized repeatedly. She insisted she was only trying to help, that her intentions were pure, and that she had only spoken out of genuine worry. But the justification did not matter. The damage was absolute. Sarah did not react with anger or cause a scene. Instead, she quietly withdrew. She never spoke to Clara again beyond the bare minimum of professional necessity. It was a cold, permanent distance. Clara had shown that she could not be trusted with anything that mattered. In trying to buy a moment of social connection with someone else, she permanently bankrupted her relationship with the one person who had trusted her. Have you ever caught yourself doing this without realizing it? Have you ever shared someone else's news, disguised as concern, just to have something interesting to say? Marcus Aurelius wrote extensively about integrity and the sacred nature of trust. He understood that when someone gives you their confidence, they are handing you a piece of their inner world, something they can never take back. Protecting that confidence is not just a social convention. It is an act of justice. It is a commitment to honoring the vulnerability required for another human being to lower their guard. When we betray that trust, we are not just hurting them. We are revealing a deep flaw in our own character. We are showing that we value the temporary social currency of having information more than we value the person who trusted us. We live in a world that constantly begs us to speak, to share, to post, and to comment. We are encouraged to turn every detail of our lives and the lives of those around us into content or conversation. But the Stoics practiced a different path. They practiced the art of containment. Seneca once advised his friend Lucilius to think deeply before admitting someone into his inner circle, but once that trust was established, to treat them as another self. If you treat a friend as another self, their secrets become your secrets. Their vulnerabilities become yours to guard, not to distribute. If someone shares something personal with you, default to silence. Treat their words as a sacred deposit. If you find yourself in a gray area, unsure of whether a detail is meant to be kept private, ask them directly before you speak of it to anyone else. Better yet, choose the safety of silence. If you have made it this far, what comes next is the part almost nobody gets right. Because these habits of disconnection are not proof that you are a bad person. They are simply proof that you have been living without awareness. Most of us commit these subtle relational crimes without ever realizing the wake of destruction we leave behind. The difference between those who build deep, unbreakable connections and those who find themselves perpetually lonely is not a difference of intention. It is a difference of presence. Stoicism teaches us that relationships are the laboratory of character. They require constant, rigorous self-examination. Marcus Aurelius did not write his meditations to lecture the world. He wrote them to lecture himself. He used his journal to examine his own patterns, to notice where his ego was trying to sabotage his connections, and to realign his actions with his values. He understood that we do not need to become perfect overnight. We simply need to wake up to what we are actually doing in our daily lives. You do not need to fix every one of your bad habits today. That is a recipe for overwhelm and failure. Instead, choose just one area of your communication. Focus on it for the next 2 weeks. Perhaps it is the habit of listening without preparing your response. Perhaps it is the habit of withholding gossip, even when you are dying to share it. Catch yourself in the moment. Feel the physical urge to speak, to interrupt, or to share, and consciously choose the alternative. Watch what happens to the quality of your conversations when you remove just one of these barriers. You will find that people begin to lean in. They will feel a sense of safety and calm in your presence that they rarely experience elsewhere. True connection is not complicated, but it requires us to put down the small, ego-driven habits that quietly push others away. Now you know what they are. Now you have the choice to act differently. If these reflections have brought you some clarity today, consider subscribing. We will continue to explore how Stoic wisdom can help us build deeper, more authentic lives. If this video helped you look at your own patterns with honesty and without shame, please like it, so others can find this path to self-awareness. Thank you for your presence here today. Stay aware, stay purposeful, and stay connected.